as I was getting ready to talk to you, I was looking around at interviews that you had given, and it occurred to me, I would be so awfully daggone tired of people asking me when I was going to quit. You get asked when you're going to quit 5 times a day. You can't go out of your house. Have you had enough of people asking you when you're going to quit running for president?
You know, Chris, they were asking me when I was going to quit back in July. They were asking in August. They asked before Iowa. They asked after Iowa. They asked after New Hampshire. They asked after South Carolina. And they will ask multiple times today. And I think that they have probably realized that, look, we have a country to save. And I am fighting because as long as 70% of Americans say they don't want Joe Biden or Donald Trump, as long as there are states out there that say they want their voices heard, we're going to keep doing it. I mean, we've had thousands of people in Virginia. We had thousands in North Carolina. We're now here in Boston. We're going to have a big event tonight. We have big crowds everywhere because it's people who want a new generational leader. They don't want to have to choose between two 80-year-olds for president. And they know we need to go in a new direction. We can't keep going in all of this chaos. And I think that that's what we're trying to offer them as an alternative.
So you mentioned you're in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And this is the conundrum for you and your campaign, which is for the 2020 election, allies of then President Trump, now former President Trump, pushed through rules changes, and in a bunch of states pushed through rules changes to basically protect frontrunners, to protect incumbents. Massachusetts is a state where there's a lot of Nikki Haley voters. We saw just across the border in New Hampshire, there are plenty of Nikki Haley voters in New Hampshire. There's plenty of Nikki Haley voters in Virginia, particularly in Northern Virginia. There's lots of these folks around, but with these rules changes, if Trump gets to 50%, gets over 50%, he sweeps all the delegates because of the rule changes. How do you confront that? How do you and your campaign think about dealing with that?
I mean, it's really pretty amazing to see what has happened with the rules changes. All you have to do is look at Nevada to see what happened. All you have to do is, look at what's happening at the RNC, that he, before a primary's over, has put his daughter-in-law as the head and is putting his campaign manager to run the place. And look at the fact that he's put $60 million worth of campaign contributions towards his personal court cases. And we see this with, multiple elections around that they've changed the rules. But you know what? We just keep running through the tape, because I think at the end of the day, if he's changing the rules, if there's nothing I can do about it, I can still be loud. I can still make sure that people's voices are heard, and we'll still try and fight.
Okay, so you tweeted out a poll from the New York Times. This poll, by the way, is a poll that Democratic despair here in Washington tonight. You can feel a plume of sorrow hanging over the city as the New York Times poll came out and basically said Joe Biden is the pits when it comes to persuadable voters, and he is down 5 points in a head-to-head matchup with Trump. He's down 10 points to you. You said that Trump is barely outside the margin of error. But he is outside the margin of error. And in every poll for weeks and weeks, Trump does beat Biden, right? You beat Biden by more, but Trump does beat Biden. Talk about an electability argument when basically what you're saying is anybody beats Joe Biden, but I'd beat him by more. Why is that a persuasive argument to make to Republicans?
Well, I think, first of all, if you don't want to look at that, look at what's happened around the country. I mean, I was in Michigan. In 2012 in Michigan, they were a bright light. They were winning seats up and down the ticket. They had passed right to work. They were like being hailed as an amazing state. I was just there. Since Trump took office, since he became president, they've lost the governorship, they lost the state house, they lost the state senate. From there, I went to Minnesota. The exact same thing happened. I went to Colorado. No Republican has gotten over 45% statewide since Donald Trump became president. You go to Virginia, same thing. Glenn Youngkin was able to win governor, but he had to keep Donald Trump away from him. This is the fact that everything Donald Trump does, he loses. And so, first of all, 5 points, 4 points is margin of error. So, okay, he squeaks by in that. I get 10 points. In the Marquette poll last week, it's margin of error. I defeat Joe Biden by 18 points. This is more than the presidency. It's House, it's Senate, it's governorships, it's school board. It's about getting our country back on track, because if you go in to D.C. with a double-digit win, You go in and you stop the wasteful spending happening by Republicans and Democrats and get our economy back on track. It gets our kids reading again and back to the basics in education. We secure our border once and for all with no more excuses. We bring law and order back to our cities, and we have a strong America that prevents wars that we can be proud of. But more than that, you look at the fact that this is a ship that has a hole in it. Donald Trump is the hole. If we decide to go down with Donald Trump as the nominee, we can assume that the ship is going to sink. I'm saying we need to go in a new direction. We can't be a country in disarray and a world on fire and go through 4 more years of chaos. We won't survive it. And I have said from the beginning, the party that gets rid of their 80-year-old candidate is the party that's going to win. I don't think Joe Biden's going to be the candidate. And so I think that there's a possibility we have a President Kamala Harris or we have someone else. But this is about what do we want. You look at the thousands of people that show up at our events. These aren't anti-Trump rallies. These are actually Americans who want to see America go forward. They want an America that their kids can be proud of and that they can be proud of. They're tired of all the things that are chaotic. It's not normal for under Joe Biden to have illegal immigrants coming across the border and no one stopping them. It's not normal for Joe Biden to focus more on gender pronouns than whether the kids can read them. It's not normal with Joe Biden to have these wars around the world. But you look under Donald Trump, it's not normal to mock members of the military. It's not normal to side with a tyrant over our allies who stood with us at 9/11. It's not normal to spend campaign contributions on your personal court cases. If Joe Biden talks,
I want to talk about that. I do want to talk about that. So celebrating his victory in the caucuses in Michigan and Idaho and Missouri, Trump called you a semi-Republican who's not as smart as Nancy Pelosi and blah, 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 blah. Said all that stuff. And it got me thinking. For you, if you're making an electability argument, which you mostly were throughout your campaign, you were saying, I'm the more your central argument I have observed to Republicans is I'm a better choice, right? And you make a case for yourself as better on policies and all of those things. But the core argument is let's unite as a party and come behind me, the most electable candidate, and I can win. Over time, as you have sharpened your tone about Trump, and I wondered this. How much of this has been a strategic shift that as you move later into the primaries, it's time to, as we say in politics, sharpen contrasts? And how much of it is the fact that he, like, the way that he talks about you, the things that he says about your husband, the way he is scornful of your heritage and does all of this stuff, how much of this is personal for you? How much of this is strategic for you?
None of it's personal for me. I mean, look, we had 14 people in the race. I defeated a dozen of the fellas. I've got one more I'm trying to catch up to. This is not personal. I voted for Donald Trump twice. I was proud to serve America in his administration. That is his character. That is who he is. That is what he does. But the people that are coming out for me see a shift in the Republican Party. I believe in smaller government. I believe as an accountant, we've got to pay down this debt. I see us going off a fiscal cliff. I think that we've got to make sure that we do something to get our economy back on track. Donald Trump put us $8 trillion in debt in just 4 years. He says it's about COVID. Less than 20% was about COVID. I want to shrink our agencies. He grew our agencies. I want to clean up our agencies. He cluttered our agencies. And the Republicans have followed suit. And you see that in the $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill that they passed under Trump. You see that in the 7,000 earmarks that they put through last year, opening them up for the first time in 10 years. Republicans are spending in the exact same way as Democrats. That's Donald Trump doing that. And then look at national security under Donald Trump. I believe in peace through strength. I believe alliances matter. I believe that alliances, when they're strong, they intimidate our enemies. Donald Trump said that he would tell Putin he would encourage him to invade our allies. Trump is willing to side with a dictator who kills his political opponents, who arrests American journalists and holds them hostage, and who's made no bones about wanting to destroy America.
And I want to ask you about that. All of these things. I very much want to ask you.
My point is,
go ahead.
My point in this, Chris, is the fact that this has become a Republican Party about one man. I am focused on a Republican Party that's about the American people. And if you look at the crowds, my crowds are not anti-Trump. They see what's happening. And if you look at the early states, no, I didn't win the states, but I got 40% in the early states. So you look at that, that's no small number. Then you look at Michigan. Donald Trump campaigned 8 years in Michigan. Hold on. Donald Trump campaigned 8 years in Michigan. I campaigned in 2 days, and I got 30% of the vote. This is a contingency that is not just going to suddenly go and vote for someone else. This is a contingency that said they've had enough of the chaos, and they want to go forward.
So to that point, you told NBC that voters should have the full answers on Donald Trump's criminal cases before the election. You were talking about with the Supreme Court intervening, delaying prosecutions on the January 6 cases. And as we have seen, the Georgia case is crazy, and there's delays and delays and delays. And I took you to be arguing that this should all be aired out before the election, and that voters have a right to see that. On the Supreme Court part, though, you served in a presidential administration. You were an executive yourself in South Carolina for 2 terms. Aren't there some questions about executive immunity that need to be sorted out here on the Supreme Court side? Are there concerns about the prosecution? Are there legitimate questions? I'm not talking about Trump's, what did he say, absolute immunity, but are there legitimate questions to be limbed out here by the Supreme Court on executive immunity?
Absolutely. And look, what I said is it would be nice if the voters knew what was going to happen with these cases before the election. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think the Supreme Court needs to hear this case on immunity. I mean, we can't have a president that's completely immune of anything. We can't have a president that doesn't have to follow the laws. And so I think it's actually very good that the Supreme Court's going to have to go and settle this once and for all so that nothing like this happens going forward, and that everybody knows exactly, when you're tried as a citizen, what immunities you have as a president, and how that's going to play out.
Okay. Last thing I'm going to ask you before you run away is Donald Trump compares himself to Alexei Navalny and says that Joe Biden and the Democrats are like Vladimir Putin and his regime in Moscow. You know the people involved. Both you worked for Donald Trump. You served as ambassador, United States ambassador to the United Nations. Talk about that. How do you perceive Donald Trump's comparison of himself to Alexei Navalny?
I mean, first of all, Navalny was a courageous hero. I mean, this was a man that was fighting for his country. Putin is a man that's fighting for himself. So there is nothing about Donald Trump that is like Navalny, and it's amazing to me that it took him forever to even say anything about Navalny. He never criticized Putin for killing Navalny. He just went and said that he was a victim like Navalny. That is not the case. Instead, he needs to explain why he said he would encourage Putin to invade our allies. I mean, that's the thing is, the problem with Donald Trump is everything is about him. He literally has an inability to not see things that are just about him. And the focus needs to be on the American people. But once again, he takes a case like this where you've got a courageous hero fighting for his country who was murdered by a dictator, and he's going to suddenly act like he's Navalny. No, instead, he needs to quit getting weak in the knees on Putin, which is what he continues to do.
Ambassador Haley, we are very grateful for your time. Have fun out on the campaign trail and come back and see us soon.
Thanks so much. Go to NikkiHaley.com.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.